introduction to one of my favorite people on earth, Mr. Stephen Oliver, who is with the Advisor Marketing Podcast. Now, Stephen is a true maverick, and I mean that in every sense of the word. Not only in our business, but I have to tell you, his clients universally love him, and they grow at rates that they wouldn't believe it's possible. Now, on this podcast, in each episode, Stephen is joined by various members of his team or special guests to share insider secrets to rapid growth and high net profits in your financial advisory practice. So I just want you to know you're in for a wild ride, new information, and a lot of exciting new future because of Stephen Oliver.
Hey, we are live. Stephen Oliver again. I am joined by James Pollard. James, I've been very much looking forward to this. As I mentioned before we started recording, we should have started recording earlier, is I've been cyber stalking you for a couple of years now, probably. I've got your newsletter. I've been a subscriber to your newsletter and following not everything you do, but quite a few of the things you do. But give us a little bit of your background. You and I were just talking. You're in Philadelphia. Do I have that right? You're up in the Northeast.
So I'm in Delaware. My LinkedIn profile says Greater Philadelphia because you only have two choices. You have Dover in Delaware, and then you have Greater Philadelphia. So I chose one that's more accurate.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. And you were telling me you got into marketing first through the family business, and through financial services and the family business. Let's unpack that a little bit and just give everybody a thumbnail of your background.
So long story short is I've always had an interest in two things, psychology, well, three things really, psychology, marketing, and personal finance.
Mm-hmm.
I started doing marketing on my own as a teenager because I wanted to make money. And quite frankly, like my mom wouldn't give me the money. You know, that's kind of what happens. You're like, hey,
sure.
If you won't give me the money, then I got to earn it myself. And I mean, I thank God every single day that she did that because it led me down this path. So started marketing. I was doing it at Google AdSense. If anybody knows what that is back in the day, it's not even called AdSense anymore. It's called Google Ads. Mm-hmm. Did that, did some more things, went to college, started a little personal finance company, then went back to a family business in the casino industry. For people who listen to like the podcast that I have, they've heard me talk about that before. Yeah. Did that, then wanted to go into the financial services industry because the casino wasn't really satisfying the psychology, personal finance, or marketing desire all together.
Yeah.
Well, then when I started in that industry and started talking to financial advisors and financial planners, because I was talking about my background and all the marketing stuff that I had been doing for almost 10 years at that point, they said, well, why don't you just show us this and this and this? And I was like, oh, okay. And then the Advisor Coach was born because I was like, I should probably take this show on the road. Mm-hmm. And being money motivated, of course, I have no problem sharing this. I mean, I made a lot of money doing that. And it's just, quite frankly, I could make more money doing that and running the businesses that I had started at that point.
Mm-hmm.
So I did that. The Advisor Coach was started. Then I was like, I don't really like the coaching thing. And the reason I didn't like the coaching thing is because I was repeating myself constantly. Right. So, and I just don't like that, where every week I'm having a call. I'm like, did you do the LinkedIn thing I said? Did you do the call thing I said? Did you do I wasn't down with that. Mm-hmm. So the Advisor Coach that you see today is more or less a media company. So there's the podcast, there's the newsletter, there are the blogs, there's a ton of ads, there's a ton of email and some more behind the scenes stuff, but that is the very short, very condensed version.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's exciting. We were talking about kind of both our mutual evolution in marketing and background. One of our mutual loves, and I don't mean romantically, but as far as marketing development, is Gary Halbert. And I think we've both consumed everything we could get our hands on with Gary Halbert. I always enjoyed the Boren letters, the letters to his son, and I follow his son now as well. But I mean, he's not his father. But it was a really interesting series. For those who don't know, the Boren letters were Gary Halbert at one time was thrown in jail, as typical, lawmakers don't like marketers sometimes. And it was a series of letters he wrote to his son while incarcerated for various, made up infractions in my view. But tell us a little bit about some of the other background you had. You got started with Google AdSense, and for those who don't know what that was, is creating sites and buying ads. There's all kinds of iterations of that. There was buying affiliate traffic and pointed at affiliate programs. There was creating web traffic on your own and then getting paid by Google for the ads, et cetera. But how did that evolve into really getting the depth of marketing knowledge that you have now? Because I see you doing a great job on LinkedIn. You do a great job with copy. You do a great job with various products you put together. And as I said off camera, I'm always very impressed with the copy you put out. Yours is one of the few emails that I read when it comes through. In fact, the one you put out today, I was. You see, it's easy to swagger around in the sunshine. I'll truncate it a little bit, but there's more wisdom in one of my whoopsies than a dozen of my proudest victories. Indeed, these gut-wrenching, soul-crushing, and ego-battering mistakes are where the real treasures are hidden. I love that. That's so well crafted. Out of curiosity, how long did you spend crafting that email?
That particular email, I can tell you because I wrote it today.
Yeah, there you go.
So, and I track everything I do. Yeah. So I wrote that from, let's see, I wrote that from 9:46 a.m. to 10:30 a.m. So that was 44 minutes. That's exceptionally long. That is way longer than I normally take on an email. But this particular one, the subject line was long, rambling email. So sure. It's a Friday and I'm just taking it easy. And this is kind of what I enjoy to do. But to get to that point of copywriting, I don't think people truly understand. I have spent a long time in just studying everything I get my hands on. The Gary Halbert stuff, Gary Bensavenga. I've been through his program many times. Ben Settle, Matt Fury, just you name it. Dan Kennedy for sure. Absolutely. Russell Brunson to a lesser extent. I mean, I have so many names that John Carlton. I mean, it's just ridiculous. I've consumed,
I love John.
consumed. And eventually you start to, speaking of Gary Halbert, I think Gary Halbert gave this advice in the Boron letters. I could be wrong, but he talked about handwriting advertisements. And I did that. And because I was too stupid to know any better, I figured if he did it and he recommends it, I got to do it. I'm a very coachable person. So I did that. And lo and behold, I started thinking in copy and speaking in copy. Like even if as I'm talking to you right now, I'm probably using some of the same phrases and the mannerisms and the rhythms that I would use when actually writing. So I can't really separate myself from that process anymore. And it's unfortunate because it's hard for me to teach copywriting specifically because there are so many things that I miss simply because I've been involved in that world so long. I mean, written so much.
Well, it's the way I heard it described is the cycle of learning is you go from unconscious incompetence, which is where most people start. You're learning to drive, you don't even know what you don't know. Then you go to conscious competence where you can, conscious incompetence. So you don't know it, but you still don't know how to do it. Then you move to conscious competence, and then you move to unconscious competence. And my background is in martial arts and martial arts education mostly, and I always had to train the instructors. The highest talent athletes were not necessarily very good teachers because they didn't know what they were doing. You had to always keep them in that conscious competence level where they understood what they were doing, they understood the movement, they understood how to describe it, they understood the application. Because at the higher level, it's again, you mentioned Brady as a football player a minute ago, is I don't know if he'd make a good coach or not, but he may well not. It's one thing to have accomplished at a super high level. It's something else to be able to remember the process and really break it down and then share it with somebody else. It's a very different thing, and I'm sure you would agree. But you have enough knowledge and background, and I'm sure you're very good at breaking it down for people. What happens is you go into auto mode when you do your own stuff. And and again, this came out really well. I was very impressed. I was kind of happy you sent it out this morning because I knew we were talking. And I went, wow, this is a great example. It's so well written. I can't wait to see it's promoting the newsletter. I can't wait to see what's in that newsletter next month. Because all of the crisis and heartbreak and the missteps and all of the other things, and that's I don't know if we stole it from Halbert or from Jay Abraham, but a damaging admission is one of the most powerful ways to build credibility, right? And that's what I see with the guru sect that go around. Most of the guru sect in the financial industry seem to be people who got birthed in big companies, and therefore got birthed in a situation where they feel like they can't do anything. So, they're not very creative. But one of the biggest challenges I see with the gurus is they try to pretend the world is all roses and flowers and that they've never done anything wrong and they've never had mistakes. And like you said, I've learned most from my crashes and failures and disasters, way more than the stuff that worked.
Absolutely. And one of the things that allows me to still teach at a relatively high level, I don't do the coaching anymore. I don't really have any desire to. But one of the things that really helps me is just having mountains of data. So when financial advisors ask me questions, I keep those. I don't just delete them. I have a little separate file. I keep them. And if I get one question, then it stays on my mind. I answer it. I move on. If I get 10, I start to think, wow, maybe this is a really pressing problem. And if I get 100, I'm like, wow, I need to definitely address this for sure and talk about it. So that kind of keeps me in touch to like, what are people actually thinking? What do they want? Am I too far ahead? Am I not far enough? So I'm so thankful that I have that data. If email didn't exist, I wouldn't have that. If the internet didn't exist, I wouldn't have that. So I am more or less a product of that technology. And with damaging emissions, especially, this is like a marketing secret. So I'm speaking more or less as a marketer now. What's interesting is that conversions go up when you show vulnerability and when you have a damaging emission. The dark psychological reason for that is because when people read the vulnerability or the damaging emission, and you say something like, well, sometimes I can't even tie my shoes, or sometimes I definitely can't fix the car, but I can do this. When you say that, what people are really thinking, whether they know it consciously or not, is, well, I'm better than him. So if he can do it, I can do it.
Yeah.
And that is what is occurring. And people don't want to acknowledge that. There's a lot of more or less dark stuff in psychology and marketing and copywriting that people really don't want to address. And it's weird because when people say, I'm great, I make no mistakes, I excel all the time, they're really hurting themselves. They don't think they are, because they think they're hurting themselves by admitting flaws. And it's not like I'm saying, oh, say I'm terrible at financial planning. Obviously, you don't want to say that.
Sure.
But if you say something else, people can now relate to you and they're less intimidated. I did a survey, and I don't want to ramble on forever, but I think this is important for financial advisors who are listening. So I did a survey of consumers, because one of the things I do, I run Facebook ads, like I go through money like water on Facebook and LinkedIn and Twitter. So I ran a survey to consumers and I asked them, what is the number one reason that you do not reach out to a financial advisor? And I think this is actually going to be in the next Inner Circle issue in the bonus. They said intimidation. They're intimidated. So if that's the number one reason, I think advisors would be well served by consciously and actively reducing that intimidation. Like, what a concept.
Well, and think of the right way to say this. I stole this characterization from Tim Ferriss. The 4-hour work week. He talked about, what was it, the old fat bald guy in the BMW convertible. And I think of all financial advisors at this point as the guy in the JCPenney suit sitting behind the oak desk, with no personality. And without creating a persona, my son and I just went to see The Flash last night. And the thing that all the Marvel and DC superhero movies are great at is the backstory. And to a great extent, the difference between the really great characters and the less great characters are the depth of pain and the depth of one thing or another. And this movie deals, 3 different versions of Batman, and then 2 different versions of the Flash, all dealing with the pain of mother and or both parents being murdered and how that shaped their character. But to a great extent, advisors seem like they're all this plastic figure, and there's no personality, there's no depth, there's no anything. The ones that I click with, and I've looked at thousands of their websites by now, the guy who has pictures of his fly fishing trip, or the pictures of his car collection, or descriptions and conversations about clients and what they've accomplished. But the ones that are all just facts and figures and stats, it's just pathetic. I had an advisor, and I'm at the opposite end, where I do high level coaching with people, mostly, by the way, in group, not in one-on-one, because I understand I used to do. I had myself scheduled where I was doing 45 one-to-one calls per week, in a week. And the problem was, I tell them, is I was having 10 or 12 conversations, or 3 conversations 10 or 12 times each. There was always 2 or 3 subjects, and I had it over and over and over again. And but where I was going with that is, advisors would be so much better to have a personality, right? To be polarizing to some extent. Doesn't have to be politically or religious or whatever, but it could be, depending upon what their target audience is. But to have a personality, to have hobbies, to share that, to wear it on their sleeves. Where I was going with that is, I had a couple of advisors with, I believe, Morgan Stanley, and I'm trying to get them to do email to their prospect and client list. And so they sent me the email, and it was it must have been written by 4 lawyers and 3 other compliance people and 2 PhDs in finance. And it was the most dry, boring, ridiculous, horrible crap ever in the history. And I'm like, nobody wants to read this. What the hell? And they're like, well, this is our approved, well, the corporate approved stuff isn't what you need to be doing. You need to be doing stuff that's not going to have compliance issues, but at the same time is personality laden, is interesting, is fun to read. Let's talk more about that. I mean, I think it's so important. One is regularity. I don't see you having any fear of emailing your list a lot. But number 2 is making it personal and engaging and in some way interesting.
Well, I am by no means a compliance expert. Mm-hmm. However, I probably know more about the compliance process than most financial advisors, simply because I've just been hitting my head against the wall for so many years.
Oh, sure.
What I can say is, and I've had this conversation a lot with advisors, you're not making investment recommendations. You're not recommending ETFs, because there are certain podcasts where they say, oh, we recommend a broad-based index fund, but they can't give the ticker. I understand that. I get it. Totally get it. You can't say I'm investing in this thing. I know that. But when you show your personality, when you're having fun, does that mean that you have to give financial advice? No. Does that mean that you have to make a recommendation? No. One of the reasons that email marketing can work really well for financial advisors is because it gives them a chance to showcase their personality, and you don't have to do any of this. There have been financial advisors where they tell a story about how they invest personally. I'm like, no, don't do that. Talk about restaurants, talk about sports, talk about movies, talk about books. And when they finally get it, where if I say, look at your email autoresponder sequence, you have 10 of these emails in here. I want you to go through and I want you to get rid of every single thing that talks about money. They're like, oh, but that's what I do. It's like, people already know that you are a financial advisor. How did they get to your list? Oh, well, I have it on social media. I have it on my website. Exactly. What does your website say? Oh, my website says I'm a financial advisor serving nurses. Okay. So do you think that someone who opts in from your website is just going to have amnesia and forget that you're a financial advisor? Well, no. And it seems kind of silly. And obviously I'm not as crass as that, but it's frustrating sometimes. And they say, oh, well, they sign up from LinkedIn. Really? What does your LinkedIn headline say? Financial advisor at XYZ Wealth Management. If they're terrible, financial advisor serving this niche. If they're a little bit better, they can sprinkle it up. So they obviously know you're an advisor.
Yeah.
They know that's what you do. So you don't have to run into compliance issues. Now, I know that it's different companies have different little tweaks and things that they want to put in there. But as far as the actual content, if it's not about money, it's not about investments, it's not about recommendations, you should be okay. And what you talk about instead is you, your personality, your life, what you like to do, and your clients.
Yeah. Yeah. And the same thing is true of testimonial and client feedback. I mean, you can feature a client, talk about the relationship you built, have them say nice things about you without making earnings claims, without, giving returns, without getting into all of that kind of stuff. And again, I think most advisors, especially in the big companies, are so cowed by compliance that they haven't really thought through what the real issues are, right? They haven't thought through that it's okay to communicate with prospects and clients. It's just not okay to make claims that aren't substantiated, to, put non-representative results up here, to have one testimonial that's, the top 1% of my client, outcomes, but not have a broader base. It's all of those things. And of course, across the spectrum, we know that's true. The Federal Trade Commission regulates that. Whether this is I was in franchising for many years, and it's a super regulated situation. But as long as you disclose what reality is, and don't make it, unrepresentative, then you're fine. But most of what I see with advisors, they just need to have a personality. They need to stake out a niche. They need to have a personality. They need to stand out. James, I haven't been doing it as much recently, but I went through a blitz where I listened to all of your podcasts. I don't know if I would say all. You've got a couple hundred of them or something like that.
But you're still standing. That's amazing.
Yeah. And I went through now a mutual friend, or I don't know if you know him, Dan Cuprell and a bunch of others. And, every time I meet somebody whose podcast I've gone through, I already feel like I know them, right? It's like meeting a celebrity, because you've heard about their family, their kids, their background, their likes, their dislikes, their lifestyle, all of that kind of stuff. And that's where I think new media, whether it be social media, podcasting environment, YouTube, email, all of that is super effective for just creating a situation where they feel like they know you, they feel like they like you, they feel like they trust you. And again, it's the old sales matrix. People are going to first decide whether they like you or not, and then they're going to figure out whether they trust you or not, and then they're going to figure out whether the proposition you're making makes sense for them, and then they're going to figure out whether budgetarily it works for them or not.
It's Lee Milt here, and I'm delighted to interrupt you today and let you know that I've been working with Stephen Oliver for 10 or 15 years now. He's a great guy. I love all the research that he does. And I just wanted to let you know that if you're enjoying the content on this podcast, then you really want to make time to visit advisorwealthmastery.com. And why should you do that? Well, because you're going to receive 2 of his great books, and actually one of mine called Success is an Inside Job. You'll also get a lot of absolutely free material on growing your practice through effective marketing. So again, take the time to go to advisorwealthmastery.com.
But people miss those first 2 steps. If I don't like and trust you, doesn't matter what else you're saying, or how great a closer you are, and anything else.
I need to get better at that, because with the podcast, especially, I am very brusque. I go on rants, and a lot of times advisors will tell me, I hated you at first. And because it's just this style, it's just not for them. Sure. And my personality, I am an INTJ, which is very low on agreeableness. I don't play nice most of the time. I mean, I'm a nice person, like talking and enjoying conversation or whatever, but I get to the point, right? I am very straightforward, and that's just how I operate. And I lean into my personality. That might be in the newsletter. That might be one of the mistakes, but they come around. They say, I realize that everything you're saying is true. You back up a lot of stuff. They don't say damaging emission, but they say that too. So they come around, and the podcast itself is very polarizing, and it was never meant to be that way. I guess I'm just a polarizing person. I never sat down and I said, this is what I'm going to do because it's a marketing strategy. I'm going to make people think this. And I mean, I've said some crazy stuff, and I've said stuff that I thought was tame, and got like people lost their minds. But I've also said stuff like, if you're on the email list, you're reading emails. Not too long ago, I sent an email out that said, my wife thinks these financial advisors are smoking crack. And I really pushed it. I was like, I'm going to push it today. Nothing. Crickets. That email was just, no one said anything. There was no response. And I'm like, what do you people want? But that's how they, I don't know if that's helpful for anyone, but that's my experience.
There was a great series of books. I'm gonna slip on his name here for a second, but it was all about using the Myers-Briggs personality temperament sorter, and looking at high-level entrepreneurs and high-level achievement throughout history. And he was the co-founder of Chuck E. Cheese with Nolan Bushnell.
I think I know who you're talking about, because he's from Naples.
There you
believe.
Go. Yep. I've met him several times, heard him talk, one thing or another. Hopefully it'll come to me in a second. But I'm also an INTJ.
Cool.
For the top, 0.5% of the population or something like that. And I must admit, I've been at some level or another doing the coaching and so forth for about 40 years in a really organized, focused way since the late mid 90s. And I will say it the opposite. I am very intentionally in your face and polarizing. You know, I tell people I'm an acquired taste, but I really want the ones who are going to click with me and really want to, you know, have the others run away in terror as quickly as possible, to tell you the truth. And I think people miss that. Again, I keep talking to one of my the way I got pulled back into the financial side was I was actually a client of his with Northwestern Mutual. But we keep having these conversations about, oh, I don't want to offend anybody, and I want to, you know, one thing or another. I'm like, no, you have things that are very interesting about you. You have very interesting hobbies. You have an interesting background, one thing or another. You should be talking about that. You have very clear political beliefs. If that's you know, a niche you want to target, which it seems like all the clients that you click with are in that same category, why not? I have a couple that are very specifically, you know, targeting people who are in the top third on the right wing side. But okay, fine. Be on all those podcasts, be on all those newsletters, you know, wear it on your sleeve. There's plenty of them out there to be gotten. Why not? It is interesting. In fact, you held up my book, which I appreciate a minute ago. I don't think I even have my book here.
Yeah, I have it here for you.
There you go. There you go. But I do tell people, if they want to get an idea of, you know, of what my mindset is, just read the first couple of chapters, you know, because it's very much in your face, wear it on your sleeve, be a personality, and get out there and have people click with you or not. I think nothing is more effective than looking at, you know, high level business leaders, whether it's you know, in the public sector, in politics, or in business, is, you know, you really can't be super high profile without being very polarizing. People are either going to love you or hate you. You know, the most powerful person in the world is president of the United States, which almost by definition has 40% of the population guaranteed to hate him at any one time. And sometimes 50, 60%, you know, depends on how they come across. But, you know, that's certainly an example of, you're better off to work with people you're going to love working with, and you're better off to attract the people that you're really going to enjoy, and then you're better off to repel the ones that are not going to be a good fit for you.
It's funny that you mentioned that, and we can go there if you would like to talk about it, because there is something that people will say, oh, well, he's experimenting with this. I'm absolutely not experimenting with it. This is something that, so in August, late August, early September of 2022, I essentially came out of the Christian closet. Mm-hmm. And I'm not the type of person who pushes religion on people. I really don't care what people do. Right. I really don't. That's the INTJ again. Yeah. I legitimately don't care. I can talk to people about it if they're interested in hearing more, but I started explaining, I was setting up the advisor coach in these examples that I gave according to Christian principles. Yeah. And I started saying, well, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. These are all biblically based. Mm-hmm. And people, what I noticed was, because I've been emailing for years at this point, and I've had relationships with a lot of different financial advisors, the ones who claimed to be the most open-minded and the most tolerant, and I see these people, I see them on social media where they claim tolerance, they claim open mind, they went bonkers. And they immediately, they burned the bridges with me. They called me every name in the book. And I was like, what happened to that open-minded stuff? Yeah, and it was a rude awakening for me. And that's where I was like, you know what? Okay. So I started going into, again, this is the businessman speaking, went into my shopping cart provider and went by every person who called me these things and responded back, oh, fairy tale book, can't believe you do this. I thought you were an intellectual. And I was like, wow, this is hardcore. Yeah. And went one by one and put them in the shopping cart. Zero purchases. Oh, yeah. Zero, ever for years, nothing. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to start talking more about this. And I'm still, I don't want to say walking on eggshells. I'm still tiptoeing a little bit where I'll say, look, I really don't care. And it's not just a marketing thing. I legitimately don't care. I recommend that people read everything, the Holy Quran, the Bible, read stuff by Lao Tzu, The Art of War, like read it all. I want you to read it. I want you to understand worldly wisdom, but it's just that me personally, I picked this one to study in depth. And I believe that it is just a source of wisdom that I can apply to business. One of the emails that I have planned to come out in the near future is financial planning unbiblical? And there's a part in James, so James chapter 4, where there's a section where he talks about, like, don't go into a town and say that we're going to have this profit and basically plan for the future. And an advisor asked me, hey, I came across this verse three verses in James where planning for the future appears to be unbiblical. And I'm like, no, this is where I can help people. Because here, this financial advisor's confidence may have been shattered because a fellow Christian, and he is reading this stuff, and he could have believed that planning for the future and financial planning and retirement planning is unbiblical. I was like, no, hold your horses. What he's actually saying is that you need flexibility. And that's exactly what financial planners provide. So when I tell him that, and I'm like, you don't know the future. You can't plan for 30 years and you know what's going to happen in year 29, day 400 or day 200. It just doesn't work that way. But if you have flexibility built in, meaning you have disability insurance, you have life insurance, if the worst happens, then you're protected. That is 100% in line with biblical principles.
Sure.
And me sharing that with him, that's better than any marketing advice I can give him, because now it resonates with his core, that he knows that his whole identity, if he is wrapped up in Christianity, he knows that it is 100% aligned with his career. And that's going to propel him more than any button color or subject line.
Oh, absolutely. And bring it back to the business lesson of going through and looking at the people who are responding negatively and seeing whether they were actually spending money with you or not. And again, people who aren't spending money with you, aren't engaging, aren't doing the things that you want them to do, are the ones you don't want on your list. The goal is not a big list. The goal is a responsive list. The goal is a list of people who click with you. And whether it was they had already sensed that you were thinking differently than they were, or whether they were just not good buyers to begin with, doesn't really matter in the scheme of things. What matters is you manage to flush out the non-buyers and really make rabid fans of the buyers. And that's the important part. And you're much better off with and again, stealing from Gary Halbert, Gary's famous, if you had one advantage, if you had a burger stand and at the corner, or a fast food stand, what would be the one advantage you'd have? And people come up with different cuisines and so forth. It's like, no, I don't want a starving crowd, right? That's the deal. You want a crowd that's starving for the message that you're looking for. But then it media, I'll steal from Dan Kennedy, message, media, market. You want to make sure that the message is targeted at the right audience. So, if you were in San Francisco, you could be who you are and find a rabid following, and you could be the opposite and find a rabid following. But you've got to go search out the right group. You don't want to be on the opposite end of that spectrum and trying to market to the big churches, in California. You want to be really targeting the audience well. And I think people miss that, is whether it's Facebook and the other social media platforms, of course, are genius at collecting lists and matching the message with the market and really watching the nuance of that. And to some extent, they've taken away some of our flexibility recently, right? One of the things that I wanted to do was target Spanish-speaking, dual language, Hispanic households, and all of a sudden they put that in the same category as redlining and so forth. And really, what I wanted to do is have bilingual or Spanish-only ads going to people with pictures that looked appropriate for the market, everything else looking appropriate for the market. But it's so important to pick the media and pick the people you're targeting when you have that opportunity, based upon getting not just traffic, not just opt-ins, not just people raising their hand, but the right ones, the ones you want to deal with. I've always felt most people, what they do early on is they have the fog the mirror syndrome, right? Is, anyone who can fog a mirror and then, the check will clear, they can give it to me. But later on, oftentimes they figure out they built a business full of people that they don't like particularly, filled with people that are difficult to deal with. Oftentimes, the ones that are making them the most money are the ones that are easiest to deal with, and the ones that are making them the least money or losing them the money is the one that's creating 80% of their headaches.
Absolutely. And I think it's kind of funny / sad, not like haha funny, but ooh, you shouldn't do that funny.
Yeah.
There are certain people who will try to mimic the business model of like the Inner Circle newsletter. And what they don't see is that I'm not designing it for maximum profitability.
Right.
If I were designing it that way, it would have a money back guarantee.
Yeah.
It would have fewer bonuses actually, because the bonuses are overwhelming. That's a bad marketing strategy.
Yeah.
The headline would be a little bit different. The ads would be a little bit different. They wouldn't repel as hard. Now, repulsion is necessary, but I take it a little too far. But the reason is I genuinely want the right people.
Right.
I could get a lot more subscribers. I could, and it's not like I don't. I mean, I run ads all the time, but
Sure.
It's not designed that for every single person to come through. And I have seen people in other industries they will basically take that kind of approach. I'm like, well, is that your goal? Do you have the same goal as I do? Because if you don't, then this is probably not going to work for you. And there's a lot of stuff behind the scenes that people don't really see. You brought up the podcast thing earlier, but you were listening to the show. I had this conversation with producer Jonathan Rivera about a week ago, maybe 10 days ago. And I was asking him, well, what do you think the magic is of podcasting? And he said, you eventually cross a threshold where people now feel like they know you. And I've told advisors for a long time, I was like, don't try to start a podcast unless you're committed to 100 episodes, because something magical happens. And maybe it's not 100. I don't know. That's a completely arbitrary number. The point is, most podcasts don't get past 3 episodes and very few get past 10. Well, let's do the math here. Let's say that you have 30-minute episodes and you have 10 of them. Well, that's 5 hours. That's great. That's a wonderful relationship that you could build with someone, and you can absolutely establish trust, credibility, and rapport in 10 hours or 5 hours. However, let's say you have 100. That means a person has spent more than 2 entire days with you, listening with you or to you, and learning with you, and having a what's it called? Like a something, there's a word for it, a relationship with you.
Right.
It's like a one-way, like a TV media type relationship. And it's extraordinarily powerful, and it can't really be matched elsewhere.
And I think I don't know if you know Dave D, but he was, part of the Dan Kennedy company for many years. And I continue to work with him. And he made a comment the other day, which made a lot of sense to me, is I think most people do the podcast thinking they're going to do a podcast and get a flood of customers, because they're going to go discover the podcast and all of a sudden they're going to come back. Well, it is true that it's a useful marketing tool done the right way. But his description I thought was really good. As he said, it's one more way for them, once they find you, to keep in touch and be, for you to be dripping on them. And that's the way I feel about YouTube as well. It's, they're not going to watch a video and all of a sudden they're spending $30,000 a year with me. But what I find with my clients I've been working with now for years, sometimes I did a poll. I had 30 of them together the other day, and I did a poll and I said, how long were you paying attention to my stuff before you ever started working with me? And one of them said 7 years, one of them said 9 years, one of them said 3 years. Now it's kind of discouraging. I'd much rather run a Facebook ad, have a slick sales letter, and all of a sudden they're paying me top dollar. But probably the average was 2 or 3 years. One of them, I got him to say it on video finally, but it took forever. He said, well, I came across you and I thought you were an asshole. And then
that's right.
I talked to my friends about you and they told me you were an asshole. But then I showed up for one of your webinars and I just tried what you said and I made an extra $60,000. So I figured out either if you're an asshole whose ideas work or you're not an asshole, but I might as well give it a shot anyway.
Yes. I have this. That's exactly. Yep. Down like to the exact sequence. And that's creepy how that works. Yeah. There's got to be something there that I don't know enough about, because I've heard that a lot too.
Oh yeah. Yeah. But it is interesting how much you have to drip on somebody, especially in the digital age, right? I was doing long form and short form TV, probably going back 30, 35 years, when I was running the martial arts schools. And
It's Lee Milt here, and I'm delighted to interrupt you today and let you know that I've been working with Stephen Oliver for 10 or 15 years now. He's a great guy. I love all the research that he does. And I just wanted to let you know that if you're enjoying the content on this podcast, then you really want to make time to visit advisorwealthmastery.com. And why should you do that? Well, because you're going to receive 2 of his great books and actually one of mine called Success is an Inside Job. You'll also get a lot of absolutely free material on growing your practice through effective marketing. So again, take the time to go to advisorwealthmastery.com.
Yeah, I believe perhaps it has changed quite a bit just because there's so much noise. We used to say they had to see the TV spot 7 times. I'm guessing it's more like 30 times if you extrapolated those numbers. The long form ads, Dan Kennedy's done a lot of the Gunther Ranker stuff, and he says on average, I think they watch some portion of the infomercial 7 times before they ever respond. But in today's day and age, I mean, how many times do they see the Facebook ad, they see the LinkedIn thing, they see the everything else. How many emails do they have to get? How many podcasts do they have to listen to before they take action? People are much more hesitant to pick up the phone or put a credit card, on a website now than they were 10 years ago or 20 years ago. So I think you just have to keep bombarding them, but bombarding them with useful and interesting stuff. I'm sure you would agree with that.
Yeah. So the most important thing I've ever discovered for financial advisors in marketing is something I call the multiple marketing strategies philosophy. It's not new. I didn't invent it. It's been around for a long time under different names, but it's basically using multiple mediums and multiple messages. The reason that works really well is because, how much time you got? I'll give you a quick summary. The very first reason why it works well is because it immediately distinguishes you from everyone else who only uses one medium and or one message. If somebody sends a LinkedIn message to you and says, puts a wall of text there, which is what people are doing now, then they send another one and another one and another one. Well, that's kind of annoying. But if they see you on LinkedIn and they get a message from you, and then they decide to go to your website and they leave your website up on the tab because they just closed the laptop. When they come back later that night, they see that you have an email list, they click on that, or maybe they see that you have a podcast. Well, your messaging, not the message, but your messaging has gotten in front of them 4 times, if you're counting, and it doesn't feel the same. It's not as annoying. So there's something in psychology called the propinquity effect, which basically means that people build deeper relationships with the people that they see frequently. It's very similar to the mere exposure effect. There have been studies done where people who live in apartment buildings have formed tighter bonds with people if they live near the stairs or if they live near the mailboxes, simply because they're seeing these people frequently.
Right.
That works in financial advisor marketing. And we know that works because people who follow up will, generally speaking, get more clients than those who don't. That's not earth-shattering. We know this, right? People who follow up on LinkedIn are going to get more clients than the people who do not follow up on LinkedIn. Substitute whatever marketing strategy you want. But when you throw in other stuff, the conversions go way up. And that's the most important thing I can tell advisors. And I've seen it so many times, and I eat my own cooking because that's why I have so much stuff. I don't necessarily enjoy doing podcasting all the time. And I like email. I enjoy it now because I'm good at it now. And I don't really necessarily enjoy creating ads and spending all this money on ads, but the reason I do it is because it works. And the reason I tell advisors to do similar things is because it works.
Yeah.
I wish it wasn't this way. I wish it was easier.
Oh yeah.
But
yeah.
It's not.
Yeah. I learned that, back in the early 80s, I'm sure. But part of the reason I have that Neiman on the wall back there is I stole the terminology from Jay Abraham of what I was already doing back then, but he calls it the Parthenon. Most people have one way of communicating. They have one mechanism of getting new clients. And I've always told everybody I've worked with, you want to have 20 things going on every month. And whether you extrapolate that to the ways you're communicating with your current clients, the way you're communicating with prospects, or the way you're getting new leads and prospects in the door, if you don't have a bunch of things going on, I tell people in my businesses in Denver years ago, you'd ask people, well, how'd you find out about it? They say, well, how didn't I find out about you? Everywhere I look, I see you. That's really what you want. And that brings us back, advisors, even their language to me is out of sync with the way I looked at the world before I started working with them more intensely. Is everything's a referral, right? And the referral thing is, if you're not in front of your client as close to 365 days a year as possible, if you're not sitting on their desk, if you're not in their inbox, if you're not in their mailbox, if they're not following a podcast or something like that, if you're not top of mind, they're having tons of conversations with friends who need your services that they're not going to be thinking about you. I going back to, the guy I was using to begin with, many conversations came up where, unless it was exactly why I sought him out to begin with, never would have dawned on me that they should be talking to him. And if it wasn't, top of mind in some way, and I know we were, going out and having a steak for lunch once a year. Well, that left, 300 days a year or 350 days a year that I wasn't thinking about him at all.
Yeah.
And that's the other thing I see as far as referrals is, it seems to me the first way you get referrals is you educate your clients on your range of services. Number two is they like and trust you. And number three is you're constantly communicating with them in ways that are interesting so that you're top of mind. And then number four is, I always think, is pass along tools. If you do a book and they have a copy of your book to give to their friends, if you do reports and they have copies, if you do a live meeting or a webinar that their friends are invited to. But there's got to be some way, one, that it's easy for them to refer their friends, and number two, that you're top of mind and in front of them constantly.
It's almost like divine providence that we're talking about this, because literally last night I had dinner with a friend of mine who is expecting her first child. Okay. And she takes these classes at this, I don't know what it's called. There's like a place, it's not a hospital. It's a place with nurses, and they birth babies, and they teach breastfeeding and all this other stuff.
Right.
But so she signs up, she's not a marketer, so she doesn't understand that these are lead generation tools where they're teaching these classes. And now I think it's like $50 or whatever. They have a live portion and a Zoom portion. And she was telling me all about it. Well, during the conversation, we started talking about like night nurses and doulas for like the first 2 days or 2 weeks. And she was like, I really got to look, but there's none in this area. I can't really find anyone. I was like, oh, well, okay. So I start doing a little bit more research, because once I get home, I'm just like, there's got to be somebody, right? Well, it's where she was taking her classes. And she had no idea. She had no clue that they offered this service that she needed, simply because they never put it in front of her.
Yeah.
Now, multiply her by, I think she said 12 couples. So 12 couples, 24 people were in the class with her. Let's say they do 3 a week. That's 36. And $50 times 36 is a nice little income stream. Keep the lights on for the place. But how many of those people truly know that they offer these services?
You bet.
And it's heartbreaking. And I want to share that story with advisors, because I see the same thing with them. It's just that the clients don't know. They don't put it in front of them. And a lot of times the advisors shoot themselves in the feet again, and with the damaging emissions, they're really harming themselves, and they think they're helping themselves. What they do is they will act very exclusive, and they will make the client feel as if he or she is getting this victory by becoming a client. And I have nothing against that. I think that's there's a time and a place for that. But the downside of that is now they believe that even if they referred, my friend doesn't have a chance because I am the one who secured this victory. And that hurts the advisor. So if the advisor comes back and says, actually, if you have someone who you like to bring into the fold, they can use language like that, exclusive language. If you would like to have them be part of the family too, then they can get referrals that way. But like that, the breastfeeding, nursing, baby place, they just didn't know.
Yeah. And it is funny. I heard somebody else talking about that recently. I attributed, if I could remember, but a lot of your clients don't even know that you're accepting new clients. The most interesting example I ever heard, and this was via Jay Abraham. I was at one of Jay Abraham's live events, and he had a dentist from Australia by the name of Patty Lund. And it was, a completely different field, but it was all about 100% of his new client base came from referral. But all of the different pieces he put in place of, what we want clients just like you. And the hard thing that we have is screening for quality, and you're exactly what we enjoy working with and are successful with. And so what we have discovered is our clients know more people like them in almost all cases, and they've gotten a chance to pre-screen them for us, right? So he had this great language and scripting that just, exploded the business. But that's exactly right. And most people, I think all marketers, you said a minute ago, we don't realize how difficult the task is. And we tend to think that we're going to be top of mind. A story I tell personally is I had this dentist I was going to, and I liked the guy. He was good. I felt like I had good rapport with him. He was high quality, reasonably priced, whatever the criteria was at the time. And I swear to God, he just never communicated in any way. And I missed my appointment, for a 6-month or 12-month appointment. Figured out a couple months later, maybe I should go to the dentist. Couldn't for the life of me remember his name. Couldn't for the life of me figure out who he was. I kind of remembered where he was located, so I Googled dentists in that area, and there were a jillion of them. And he permanently lost me as a client, and I was a pretty valuable client just because I wasn't getting the monthly newsletter or the daily email or the regular contact in some way, shape, or form. And I was privy to a survey that Northwestern Mutual did, and two of the interesting stats they came up with, I'm going to butcher the numbers, but it was something like 65% of people who have a financial advisor aren't particularly thrilled with their financial advisor.
Oh, that's brutal.
And I think it was 30 to 35% of them were thinking about leaving at any given time. And what happens is the industry tends not to have a very high turnover rate. I mean, I come from other industries that have a really high turnover rate, but they tend not to have a very high turnover rate. And by keeping their client year over year, they think their client's happy with them. And in reality, their client's not thinking about them at all, and the pain of disconnect is too much, or they're intimidated, as you said, to start the process over again. But you're certainly not going to get expanded business, the kids, the parents, the relatives, the expanded market, and you're certainly not going to get from referrals from somebody who thinks that you're mediocre, right? If anything, the conversation is going to be, well, I use this guy and he can do this, but I mean, there's a lot of other people who can do that. They're going to get some conversation that sounds like that if they're not thrilled.
Yeah. It's so important for advisors to just, be good at what you're doing.
Yeah.
Never stop improving, never stop getting better at your craft.
Yeah.
But you have to pair that with good marketing as well. And if everybody knew that, I wouldn't have a job. So I'm kind of glad that they don't, but also kind of wish they would.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and they forget that in essence, they have to be marketing to their current clients all the time.
Right.
They have to be strengthening the relationship. And I see a lot of times they think the strengthening the relationship is frequency of telephone meetings or frequency of face-to-face meetings. Well, really it means you're in front of them regularly. There's things that are interesting regularly. There's communications regularly. Everything from at one end, gifting, sending them flowers, sending them candy, sending them flowers to the hospital when the new baby is born, to the other end of a regular newsletter, regular email communications, regularly having a group Zoom Q&A, whatever it might be, but ways of just staying in touch and staying in front of them. Hey, we've been talking quite a while already. Let's go back to the really front end side. You're spending a fortune on Facebook and a fortune on LinkedIn, you said earlier. Tell us what your takeaways are on what's working for you, what works for the advisors that you've seen working. What are the places they should be focused? I hear over and over again, by the way, advisors tell me Facebook doesn't work. I know that not to be true. And it seems like I won't go there, but it seems like mostly what they're doing is cold contacting on LinkedIn and not using it very effectively.
So this could be an entire podcast episode by itself, but
This could be a 1-week seminar.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I will tell the advisors, Put your financial advisor hat on when you're doing marketing. What do you tell your clients? You tell them to diversify. Cool. You tell them to make risk-adjusted investments that are smart for them. Cool. And that's a concept that many advisors don't even understand. They don't understand that $1,000 invested into online ads, whether it's on Facebook or Twitter or LinkedIn or Google, you're not going to get an immediate return, but you're probably going to get a greater return than the stock market over the long term. If your business is solid, that means it has a better risk-adjusted return. But I digress. Think in terms of building assets, meaning you're buying securities in companies that they're real companies, Apple, Google, Meta, Tesla, even Johnson & Johnson. You're buying real companies that exist. This is not just fake stuff. This is real. So your marketing assets should be real as well. And I think in terms of that, I don't want to live a life where I'm constantly on the hamster wheel, constantly prospecting. I just personally have never wanted to do that. Haven't done that. Don't have a future in that. So I like building assets, and those assets are online ads. If I, and I also live by the 80-20 rule. So if I have 100 advertisements, 20 of them are going to generate 80% of the results. Sure. The only thing that is stopping me from figuring out which ads those are is just doing them. So if I do them and find them, I now have ads that I can put in my vault and pull out at any time. Same thing with the direct mail piece. If I have a direct mail piece over here on my desk, if I write it once, I can use it again and again and again if it's a winner. If I have an email autoresponder sequence, it works again and again and again and again, no matter what I am doing. And same thing with web traffic, same thing with podcasting to a lesser extent, because you still have to actively record the episodes weekly or biweekly or whatever you do. But that is how I think. I think like a financial advisor. I tell financial advisors to continue thinking like an advisor, because I feel as if as soon as they get out of a meeting with a client, they take that financial advisor hat off, stop thinking in terms of investments and assets and real estate and stocks and risk-adjusted returns. They stop and they begin, not all of them, but most of them just look at other people. They start looking around. What is Joe doing? What is Bill doing? And the secret here is the same thing that they try to tell their clients. Don't keep up with the Joneses. They're broke. They have no money. They don't know what they're doing. And if financial advisors realized that they realized that and kept that financial advisor hat on, and they looked around, Bill doesn't have any money. Steve, Joe, Hannah, Sarah, they're broke. They really are. And trust me, I've had the behind the scenes conversations. It's heartbreaking. Some of the stuff I've heard from advisors who put a successful front on social media and on the websites, it's insane. It's insane. If financial advisors had any idea, so the advisor coach has products. We don't have services anymore. The last service we had was in February. We had the newsletter, right? So thousands and thousands and thousands of financial advisors come through this business every single month. Okay. If financial advisors had any idea how many credit cards got declined, it would terrify them.
You bet.
They would jump out of their skin. And I see the code. So Stripe gives you a code, and it could either be declined due to potential fraud or like suspicious behavior, or it could be because it's maxed out. And it's not necessarily because there's a problem or something. Like, I know credit card companies have problems and banks have problems. No. It's maxed out. So if financial advisors are looking around, trying to see what other people are doing, be very, very, very careful. Keep your financial advisor hat on.
Yeah. That was, I think it's Earl Nightingale's quote. If look around at what everybody else is doing and do the opposite.
So true. So true.
Yeah. The exercise, I went through this with my clients just a few weeks ago. We had a live meeting, and if you take the exercise of what's the client is worth, and then you back it out to what your closing ratio is from a meeting. So now you know what a meeting is worth. And then you back it up to the appointments you made. And now you know, based upon that percentage, what an appointment is worth. Then you back it up to what a lead is worth. And then you could back it up perhaps, in between here, what a qualified lead is worth. Because I always differentiate between a lead who's a 12-year-old in Pakistan and a lead that's truly, qualified, right? But a qualified lead is, you'll be shocked at how valuable a good qualified lead is. And you mentioned the financial advisor hat on. Well, we both know advisors in this market would be jumping up and down and thinking they're a genius if they're getting their client a 10% return or an 8% return year over year. But the marketing return, if you do it right, is 300%, 500%. I was having clients where the sale was worth $5,000, it was costing them $200, and they were thinking that was expensive. It's like, no. You need to push the budget up, push the budget up, keep generating that. And, I always think in terms of what you do and what I do, we can get people a 10-to-1 return on investment.
Easily.
20-to-1 return on investment.
Easy.
Sometimes even 30-to-1. Yeah. And again, I mean, if I, like you said, if I was able to put money into the market, and I can put $1,000 into the market today, and by 90 days from now get back 3,000, well, I'd be scrambling everywhere I look to do that. And on the flip side, they think that putting their money into tested, targeted Facebook advertising, or tested, targeted LinkedIn advertising, or tested, targeted in other media, they think that they're wasting money. They just don't understand the returns.
Now, there is a downside to that. And I talked about this in one of the prior Inner Circle newsletters, that there's a law of diminishing returns. I understand that. I get it. Like, I understand that I can't wake up tomorrow and immediately sink $1 million into a Facebook campaign targeting an audience of 20,000 people. I understand that. However, financial advisors, how much money do you really need to live a nice lifestyle? Because if you have a $10,000 campaign that generates a 20% return per year, that's an extra $2,000. You divide that by 12, and now you have your cell phone bill covered. You have your cable bill covered. It's not that hard to set up a lifestyle business in the first few years. I understand. What you want to do is you want to take the money from your marketing. This is just my recommendation. I could be totally wrong on this. I don't think I am, but you want to take that money and then put that in long-term assets. That's stuff that I can take $1 million and sink it into Vanguard. They don't even feel it. I can put it into Fidelity. It's like nothing happened. And I can get the 8% return from that. But the 8% return from that is $80,000. Well, now we're starting to talk. But in order to get to that, you have to siphon the money from your business. And in order to siphon the money from your business, you need to have business systems and marketing systems that will generate that return. I'm a relatively young guy, but if you start doing the math and you realize, okay, 20 years of marketing effort. He was a teenager at this point and not doing very well, maybe a couple $1,000s. And then he becomes an adult and he gets a real job. Okay, well, let's say that he had $10,000, and then you start doing the compound interest return. You're like, he's never stopped building. That's very interesting. And you can achieve a lot of wealth relatively quickly if you have superior returns. But this could be a week-long seminar for sure, but you have to have the actual business systems, and you have to know your numbers. The amount of financial advisors who can tell me what the S&P 500 was 2 weeks ago, and can tell me what the maximum Roth IRA contribution was 10 years ago. They can tell me these things, but they can't tell me the cost per lead. It's disappointing and it's heartbreaking. And I don't mean that in a disparaging way. I really don't, because everybody has to start somewhere. But it's just what I really am telling people is that they have the gift. You have a gift of knowing numbers. You have a gift of thinking analytically. You have a gift of thinking logically. These are all wonderful traits that not everybody has, and you should feel blessed to have these traits. But now you got to apply them. That's the big secret. You have to take these gifts and use them. And you, like I said, keep the advisor hat on. I really mean that. You bet. Well, and going back to, your early experience with AdSense, is the genius of Google, the genius of Facebook, and the other evolving platforms are the ability to rapidly test. Correct. Is, when I was doing 30-second spots on TV a lot, and long form, infomercial spots and newspaper, well, the testing cycle was super long and super expensive. Hell, if I put an ad in the yellow pages, if I bought a half page, it was going to cost me $8,000 a month or something like that. And I was going to have 12 months before I could change it. So we don't appreciate how effective the environment is now for testing, but then we don't take advantage of it as well. Facebook, by its very definition, I feel like I'm really good at figuring out what ad's going to pull, what ad's going to pull, and I can't predict this picture or this picture. Who knows? You put it out there. This one. I chewed up the time to do an MBA years ago just because I wanted to do that.
But the marketing professor really was, sharp. He wasn't just an academic. He had been behind the Coors Silver Bullet campaign, the Passport Radar Detector, a number of others. And I remember I laid out all the ads I had done in front of him, and about a third of them were a very high-end, expensive ad agency. The rest of them I had done myself. And I say, Ron, which one do you like best? And he looked at them and pondered. He said, which one pulled best? This one. I love that one.
Yeah.
And that's the deal. I mean, it takes a day or two to figure out which Facebook ad is working better. And it doesn't take much to figure out what your click-through rate is, what your opt-in rate is, what your qualified opt-in is, and then it doesn't take long to figure out what the average value is. I mean, if you do some estimation of your lifetime value of a client, you can back those numbers in quickly. We did with 12 of my clients on a white pad in about 30 minutes going through the exercise. It was eye-opening for all of them. All of them decided they should be spending more money in more different places because their client was so valuable, but they weren't really doing enough to attract them.
Here's where the mindset shift.
Yeah.
Blooper. But the mindset shift for financial advisors with ads. Sometimes I will ask them, if your ads broke even, is that a success or not? They'll say, well, it depends. Correct. It does depend. Let's say that you spend $100,000 on online ads, and it could be a year. It doesn't have to be a month. You're not going crazy or anything. It could be a year, and you break even. Okay. That kind of sucks to break even on 100 grand. Well, what you can do is, remember the 80-20 rule. You're going to go back and you find the 20 ads that generated 80% of your results. But wait, you can take it a step further, because statistically speaking, and it's not going to be exact, but it'll be close, 4 of those ads should have generated 64% of your results. That means you can go back the next year, take more money because you broke even. You're going to take that money and you're going to put it in those 4 ads. Well, do you think you'll break even on year 2? Probably not. But people just don't get to the point. They don't get to the point where they see they have enough data. They don't have enough email. They don't have enough social. They don't have enough web content to get to that point. But if you can get to that point, like when I talked to producer Jonathan about all the podcast episodes, I have 240 now, right?
Wow.
So if I look at the top, let's just say the top 10%,
yeah,
I have, what is that? 24. I don't do math in public, 24. And I can look, what do these have in common? And I can do it again and again and again. And that there's so much power in that. And I don't have to be creative. I'm not really a creative genius. I am probably better than the average person at this kind of stuff, but I'm not like in the zenith of the marketing world. I'm really not. It's just that I have the data.
Yeah.
And when I operate, there have been ads that I hate. I don't like these ads. I have an ad for a webinar it's a black and white picture. People have probably seen it. A black and white picture of this guy crying, and it just crushes it. And I despise it. I don't like running that ad, but it works. I don't want to be associated like the guy who runs the ad of the guy crying. I don't want to do that, but I'm not going to argue with the results.
Oh, you bet. Yeah. You don't have to like the ad if it works. And if you fall in love with it and it doesn't work, that's the other big mistake. And I want to be respectful of your time. But I guess one other question, what would you recommend a financial advisor do on LinkedIn in this day and age? I see most of them doing it poorly, if at all.
Pretty much the same thing, tracking your content, see what works, what doesn't work, and do more of it. Like, wow, genius advice, right? Can't believe that James shared this. He's dropping gems, but it really is. You are sharing the stuff. And like you said, I would combine my approach and your approach, because you said to show personality. That's vitally important, especially on LinkedIn. And it's not necessarily as a marketing trick or anything. It's merely to separate yourself from everyone else, because you now take the pool. Let's say that you're a financial advisor who works with everyone with a pulse. You're competing against, I don't know how many there are now, at least 300,000 people with financial advisor in their title and something or other. So a lot of people. Then you work specifically with, let's say you're terrible at niching and you choose business owners. Okay. You have that pool at maybe 10,000. Okay. That's a huge shift. But now business owners will look at you and they say, well, I've gotten a cold email from this. I've seen this website. I've looked at reviews for this advisor. So you're still competing with other advisors. But the minute you share Lord of the Rings content, as an example, and the business owner who absolutely hates Lord of the Rings is not going to say no because of it.
No.
But the person who loves it is going to be far more attracted to you. I talked about this in the email thing that's going to be in the July newsletter. The financial advisor that I was helping, I explained this concept to him. I told him, I don't talk about books and movies in my email sporadically or spur of the moment. I do it intentionally because I know that financial advisors will perk up. Now, am I talking about books I've never read? Absolutely not. Wouldn't do that. Don't dream of doing that. But I know for a fact that they love The Psychology of Money, and I do too. Right now, they love 10X is Better Than 2X by Dan Sullivan. If I talk about that, I don't think I have, but if I did, then they would be like, oh, I read that book and I love it. If I talk about Grant Cardone, I know they're going to have a lot of negative opinions about him for one reason or another. Yeah. Some might love him, but it's not necessarily worth the risk for me. I know if I talk about The Richest Man in Babylon, they're going to respond because they love that book. If I talk about Rich Dad, Poor Dad, but here's the thing. If I had a business where I was selling medical supplies to seniors and I talk about 10X is better than 2X, it'll go right over their heads. Yeah. And even though I love that and I'm sharing that because it may be a part of my life and I may like that book, it's going to go over their heads. But when I talk about it to financial advisors and I do it intentionally, I'm purposefully and consciously building that bond. It's not fake. It is not fake in any way because I have the book and I could show people the Kindle and I share parts of my life. But I don't just, I do it intentionally is a good way to sum it up. It's not random.
I was working with a client and it was pulling teeth. I kept saying, what's interesting about you? What's unique? Who do you deal with that you really click with? What's do you specialize in? And finally he says to me, he says, well, this is kind of embarrassing. I said, what's that? He goes, well, the whole other room in my house is all full of Star Wars stuff. I have pictures of me at Comic-Con in full costume and one thing or another. And I said, look, you're in the most popular science fiction movie series, et cetera, that's ever existed on the planet. I'm a Trek guy, I must say, but why don't you have the shelves behind your desk, have the pictures of you with that? It's not going to turn anybody off. Some people are going to think it's geeky. Other people are going to think it's cool. People think, oh my God, him too. And by the way, there's a big universe of them that you can target. And by the way, the first Star Trek movie came out when I was a junior in high school. So it's a long age range. I mean, my son, who's just turned 15, over his bed, he has the big Darth Vader lamp. So that's cool. You've got a wide range of age brackets that like that. And it just had never dawned on him before, don't make everything about it. But why not have that be part of your image, your backstory, what's interesting about you? People will appreciate it.
Yeah. It seems like a no-brainer, especially to people like you and to me to a lesser extent, but it never occurs to them, or maybe it does and they ignore it because again, they look at what everyone else is doing and they think, oh, well, if they're not doing it, I don't want to be the first person. The financial advisors tend to be insecure. Yeah. And I know that may not be a popular thing and they may get a lot of negative feedback, but that's only because they're insecure. And when they reach out, they're like, oh, I'm not insecure. It's like, I've just identified the most insecure person. So they don't want to try anything new. And it's not even necessarily that they're conservative, like personality wise. Yeah. It's just for whatever reason, human beings have been wired to go with the flow, to follow the crowd. And you just can't do that with marketing, because if you do what 99% of people are doing, you're going to get 99% or the average 99% results. And I know that sounds cliche. Like people have heard that a million times, but it is what it is.
It's exactly right. Hey, James, before we run out of time, anything else that you'd like to share with everybody listening?
Please listen to this episode and take what I'm saying seriously. If you're a financial advisor and for whatever odd reason you want to get involved in my world, I would go to theadvisorcoach.com. It's spelled advisor with an OR. So THE advisorcoach.com, and they'll have links there.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mentioned before, you've got a great podcast. I've listened to a ton of it. Your newsletter is very engaging. I do my best to read every issue that comes out. And this is
that was long.
month. Yeah, it was long. I actually took it to Seattle with me for my daughter's graduation. It's all about list building. And even somebody who is, I think I have a great background in marketing. You made some nice comments about the book, but I was having a conversation with somebody recently at a seminar, and they said, "Well, are you learning a lot of new stuff?" My answer was no, but I'm learning a bunch of stuff that I already knew that I'm not doing. And oftentimes after a point, if you just go back your last 5 or 10 years and think of all the things that work that you stopped doing, or think of all the things that you learned that you never implemented, that's, to me, somebody who's, whether it's you're reading a newsletter or studying a program, or you're having somebody who on a broader basis in a mastermind or coaching environment, sooner or later, that's most of the benefit, is the prod to do the stuff that you should be doing, the reminder of things that you heard before but you never implemented, the reminder of things that you may have implemented before. I was talking to as an example, I was talking to a client, and I said, "Well, what have you done to generate referrals? Have you done client appreciation events, live events, anything like that?" He said, "Oh yeah, I had a great event." "Well, what was it?" "I have a friend who owns an art gallery. We did this great event at an art gallery. Everybody loved it. I got some great referrals from it." I said, "Great. When did you do that last?" Well, it turned out he did it once. He did it 7 years before, never did it again. And his excuse was, "Well, that was a lot of hard work." I said, "Well, it was hard work the first time, still a little hard work the second time. By the third or fourth time, it's just a template. You just, do it. Why aren't you doing that once a year, twice a year?" I'm not sure how often you can go back to that well, but if you did it spring and fall, maybe you did it spring and fall for a different group of people, you could be doing that regularly. And it's just, "Oh, here's this thing that worked. Why don't I do this? I guess I was too lazy or forgot about it."
So I do have something that I would like to share with advisors.
Go right ahead.
Because there's a big difference between people who are starting out and learning the marketing stuff, and I applaud them for wanting to learn.
Mm-hmm.
But if an advisor is getting close to being a master in his or her craft, and I say that as someone who has studied copywriting and marketing for a long time, there's not really a course or a program that I can take today that will really teach me a lot of new things, because everything that is new was once old, and that sort of thing. Well, what has really changed my life in the past couple of years, and this might sound a little like esoteric, but it's studying ancient text, take like a math course or a logic course or a statistics course, because it activated new areas of my brain to further synthesize what I knew, the copywriting stuff, the marketing stuff, because your thinking can become so rigid. And especially as a creative person, I write a lot. I have the newsletter, I have the podcast. I'm writing, constantly creating. So the creative side of my brain has just been developed so well, and I'm thankful for that. But I haven't developed the other side of my brain as much. And there's an economics term. I don't really remember the economics term, but there's a productivity chart where you show how productive a company is or a country is based on its GDP.
Right.
When you introduce technology to that line, or the country or the company, whatever, the line goes up. It shifts up immediately. Think washing machines or refrigerators or computers. It's an immediate productivity boost from the technology. And I'm telling you that exposing yourself to other things, like in my case, learning mathematics a little bit more and digging deep into that, like, wow, that's really nerdy, but it activates a different part of my brain. And it's just like that economics concept where that tech moves my productivity. I feel as if I'm operating on a different planet, because I have learned these things and I've really studied. They, on the surface, they have nothing to do with marketing and business building, but it's just upgrading my human equipment, my brain, being able to process things so much faster, being able to put pieces together in ways that I wouldn't have imagined 10 years ago. It's so incredible. And it could be as simple as going to YouTube and searching Khan Academy and just going through the mathematics tutorials. And it might seem kind of boring, but you're just using a different part of your brain that you don't normally use. I know that might not have anything to do with marketing or on the surface, but it's been life-changing for sure.
Well, and the other side of it, you said it several times, is really getting in depth into psychology and understanding how people are communicating, how they're thinking is extremely vital. A really good book along the lines of what you're talking about, not mathematics, but I don't know if you've read any of Jonathan Haidt's books, but he wrote a book called The Happiness Hypothesis. And what it was is he went through all the ancient texts.
Is that the one with the elephant in the water? I think it is.
I don't remember the cover, to tell you the truth, but the Happiness Hypothesis, and then the other one was
yes, yeah, I think that's what got me started.
Yeah,
there you go. That's so cool.
And there you go. That's it. Yep. And then the follow up to that was about politics and religion, and why good people can disagree about politics and religion, but it gives a really interesting chart about how all that works. And by understanding that, you start to understand how people are going to react, how they're going to respond to things, what their response is. The other one that I think is mandatory text is Cialdini's book, Influence, Science, and Practice. If a marketer hasn't read that one, or a financial advisor who wants to be effective with people, they really missed the boat on it. But hey, we've gone I think way over our allotted timeline. Again, your website is theadvisorcoach.com. The podcast is the Financial Advisor Marketing podcast. And then the newsletter is aptly named The Inner Circle, which I think is easily accessible, if I remember correctly, from your website. So I highly recommend any and all. And, in a sense, James, you and I are in competition, sort of. But the reality is, so what? I always think of it this way: is anybody who's a top 1% or a top 10%, they're always looking for the slight edge, and they're always going to be learning from everybody who has something to teach them, either in parallel or in sequence. And where I ended up positioning myself is kind of the opposite of where you're at, only working with a small number of people at an elite level, and frankly, mostly in small group, because it just turned out to work better that way. I found when I was working individually with people, they'd say, oh yeah, well, you're a cross between Tony Robbins and Zig Ziglar. Of course you can get away with that, but I could never do it. But you mentioned this earlier. If you're in a room, either physically or virtually, what you have a tendency to do is say, that guy isn't as smart as I am. And if he's doing that, I can do that. And that social proof, which, social proof that ideas work, but also social proof of they're no smarter than you are, really works in a powerful way.
Yeah. Well, this has been awesome. I'm so honored again. Yeah, this is your book. I love this. Thank you so much for sending it to me. Extraordinary Marketing for Financial Advisors. And I don't really view it as competition, because like a lot of my products are low ticket anyway. If someone is honestly thinking, do I give Stephen money or do I give James $3.26 per day? Hey, by all means, hit the road. And I mean that nicely.
For both of us. Yes.
Right.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
But this has been James, great.
It has been great. I'm glad to meet you virtually, at least, hopefully in person soon. I'll have to see if I have a reason to come back out east. I've been going the opposite direction recently.